The Tragic Story of Caroline Crouch, a tale of love, control, and justice. The story of Caroline Crouch began with a romance that seemed like a fairy tale, but ended in a nightmare that shook the world. At just 19 years old, Caroline was a young mother with her whole life ahead of her. She fell in love with Haralambos Babis Anagnostopoulos, a 27-year-old helicopter pilot, and together they forged what appeared to be a picturesque life in Greece. Their social media posts were filled with photos of luxurious vacations, their baby, Lydia, and smiles that seemed to signal marital bliss. But behind the perfection lay a deeply troubling reality. Babis tightly controlled Caroline's every move, creating a suffocating environment of coercion and domination. The outward facade crumbled in private, where Caroline began documenting her distress in her personal diary. She wrote of her feelings of being trapped in her repeated yet unsuccessful attempts to leave Babi, who was growing more volatile and possessive as time passed. Friends and family observed troubling changes in Caroline, noticing her growing isolation and despondency. Despite her youthful optimism, Caroline found herself ensnared in a toxic relationship. Her attempts to assert independence immediately triggered manipulative tactics from Babi, leaving her unable to escape the clutches of his control. Although outwardly everything seemed picture perfect, distress signals emanated from Caroline's hidden cries for help. On the night of May 11, 2021, tragedy struck. Reports emerged of a grim home invasion at the couple's house in Glika Nera, Greece. According to Babis, masked burglars broke in, tied him up, and brutally murdered Caroline in the presence of their baby Lydia. The criminals, he alleged, also killed their family dog and made off with a large sum of cash. The heinous nature of the crime gained widespread media attention, with Babis giving emotional interviews, pleading for justice for his wife. His visible anguish struck a chord with audiences, and the search for the alleged burglars became a high-profile case. Police honed in on surveillance footage, phone records, and forensic clues in an effort to identify the perpetrators. Initially, the case captured national and international sympathy, positioning Babis as a grieving husband robbed of the love of his life. The outpour of support was immense as the public mourned alongside him. However, what unfolded just weeks later would turn this tale of sorrow into one of deception and murder. As investigators delved deeper into the evidence, cracks began appearing in Babis's account of events. Key questions arose. Why did security footage show no signs of forced entry? Why did his timeline contradict phone and motion records? What began as a unified manhunt soon took a dramatic turn toward unraveling a sinister web of lies. Piece by piece, the meticulously crafted story Babis told began to collapse. The evidence pointed away from a random robbery and toward an elaborate, premeditated cover-up. The family dog's death and the tampering with surveillance footage added a chilling layer to the emerging truth. This was no home invasion. It was a carefully orchestrated setup to disguise something far more sinister, a cold-blooded murder. Understanding the magnitude of the inconsistencies, the police closed in on Babi. Their focus shifted to uncovering not external culprits, but the hidden dynamics within the household that led to Caroline's sudden death. On June 17, 2021, just hours after Babi attended Caroline's memorial service and publicly mourned her loss, investigators confronted him with irrefutable evidence. Faced with the collapse of his fabricated story, Babi finally confessed. He admitted that there had been no home invasion, but rather a moment of horrifying violence during an argument. According to his testimony, the altercation had escalated until, in a fit of rage, he suffocated Caroline with a pillow while their baby lay nearby. Realizing the gravity of what he had done, He concocted an elaborate scheme to pass the blame onto fictitious intruders. This included staging the crime scene, tampering with evidence, and even killing the family dog to make the scenario more believable. The nation was stunned. Babis, who had portrayed himself as a heartbroken victim, was exposed as a ruthless killer. Public grief turned to outrage, with public opinion condemning him as a manipulative monster capable of unimaginable cruelty. Babis' confession highlighted the insidious violence lurking within many relationships around the world. The case resonated deeply, shedding light on the all-too-common reality of abusers who maintain a mask of charm and composure in public, while committing acts of control and terror behind closed doors. In Caroline's case, the contrast between the picture-perfect images shared online and the reality of systemic manipulation and abuse became painfully evident. During his high-profile trial, prosecutors painted Babis as a calculating individual whose actions were devoid of empathy. They argued that Caroline's murder was not born of the typical heat of the moment, but was the deliberate culmination of a pattern of violence and dominance. The court subsequently sentenced him to life in prison, ensuring he would no longer have the ability to harm anyone else. The public outrage did not end with the verdict. Activists, policymakers, and everyday people demanded stricter regulations to prevent domestic abuse and provide resources to victims. Caroline's story became a catalyst for broad discussions about coercive control and recognizing the subtle warning signs that often precede acts of violence. While the shadow of tragedy looms heavily over her story, Caroline Crouch's memory has inspired efforts to address domestic violence and support its victims. Her death called attention to the urgency of recognizing early warning signs and providing resources for victims to escape abusive relationships before they turn fatal. In Greece and beyond, organizations have embraced Caroline's story as a wake-up call. Legislative reviews have strengthened protective measures for abuse survivors, while educational campaigns aim to equip individuals to recognize red flags. Advocates also emphasize the obligation of friends and family to step up when they notice signs of distress. Caroline's diary entries, confessions to loved ones, and visible unhappiness are tragic reminders that cries for help can often be missed or dismissed. Caroline's family continues to honor her memory by advocating for change. Her legacy now serves as a testament to those who endure abuse that their pain is not invisible and that there is a pathway to justice. The murder of Caroline Crouch is a devastating example of how unchecked control and manipulation in relationships can lead to catastrophic consequences. Her story highlights fundamental truths about the power dynamics in abusive relationships and the need for vigilance from loved ones and society as a whole. As we remember Caroline, let her story remain a solemn reminder that love should never tolerate control or fear. Her life may have been tragically cut short, but her legacy stands as a stark call to action, to recognize abuse, support victims, and never ignore the warning signs. Although justice has been served in her case, the real victory lies in preventing such tragedies from occurring in the future.